Welcome to Bittersweet Theory. I want to apologize for my last video. It was some real cringe to go back and watch it, but I do believe that Michael does have a bigger role to play through these games. This video, I will be going over the Afton Family timeline of events that I believe happened leading up to 1983. I will make a second video going over everything after 1983. Before we go into this timeline, I wanted to go over one of Scott's quotes. He said in a post that the books are in an alternate universe and that the books are not to solve anything from the games, but then he goes on to say that the book is canon just as the games are. That doesn't mean that they are intended to fit together like puzzle pieces. However, you have to use the books to some extent to understand what's going on in the games. So I will be pulling some pictures and names from the books, but I just wanted to say that I haven't read any of the books and only have a broad understanding of what happens. So not only is everything not going to fit perfectly due to the fact that Scott didn't have the whole story planned out while he was making the first few games. Now, back to the theory. This all started with security breach. That first opening scene when Gregory got out of Freddy had me so confused. For the longest time in this franchise, every animatronic that the player came into contact with was trying to kill you, and we love it. I was just fine being the all-you-can-eat buffet for all of the entertainment that Fazbear had to offer. I'm not hating on the game at all. I think it was well done. As I was watching some of the game playthroughs, an idea popped into my head and it led me down the dark rabbit hole of trying to understand this complicated backstory that is FNaF. Here's a full look at the timeline of events that I put together. We are going to go over each event in the timeline up until 1983. Everything after will be in another video because there's just so much to go over. I also want to give a shout out to Brussels for putting together his timeline so that I could put together my timeline of events. No, really, without him, I would not have been able to make sense of any of this. So thank you, and now let's start from the very beginning. The first event of the timeline is that William and Henry meet. How? We may never know. Look at them. So young, filled with hopes and dreams. Both of them also have families, William having 3 kids of his own and Henry having 1 daughter. Another unsolved mystery of FNaF is what happened to their wives, but I guess some things are better left forgotten. At this point in time, life was simple. Being 2 single fathers, they needed to provide for their kids, and what better way to do that than to go into business together by buying Fredbear's Family Diner. Now, I believe that William and Henry had a Walt Disney and Roy Disney way of running their business. William is like Walt, who had all the ideas for the business, and Henry, who was like Roy Disney, who made all the ideas come to life. However, early on they ran into a small issue. If Henry was running most of the business, making sure the franchise stays successful, it leaves very little time for him to create William's ideas. William comes up with a solution by creating Sister Location Bunker, better known as Afton Robotics. This is where he is able to work on his own ideas and bring them to life. This way the business stays successful and William is able to keep working on his ideas. The reason why I believe that Sister Location Bunker was built early on in the timeline is because of Funtime Foxy. The animatronics tell the story. In FNaF 4, we see Mangle in Elizabeth's bedroom. We know that later on Funtime Foxy becomes Mangle in the second Five Nights at Freddy's location. That means that William was experimenting with the idea that kids could build their own animatronics early on. He got the idea from seeing kids play with toys like the little girl we see in FNaF 4. Scott said, "Why would the toy Chica be missing her beak? I think that is a reference to what William was working on before the events of FNaF 4 took place. Literally, take apart and put back together animatronics. From this, we know that Elizabeth was playing with a prototype of Mango before the events of FNaF 4 took place. The next event in the timeline is Circus Baby's Pizzeria. It was going to be a new and exciting sister location. Now it was William's turn to showcase his own animatronics. Life events, whether they are good or bad, lead us to make other choices in life. What I'm trying to say is that the next thing that happens in William's life changes the course of his ideas and what he creates. William has a pre-launch for Circus Babies where he has all of the animatronics in different rooms on different stages. Those stages probably looked like the ones we see in Sister Location. We know this because in Sister Location, Baby says she was on her own stage in a room by herself, and that music was coming from somewhere else, down the hall. This is where William was seeing how his creations would work around kids. Baby was different. She was still an early prototype, and he was preventing his daughter and other kids from getting too close to her. We know this when Elizabeth says, "Daddy, why won't you let me go play with her? Didn't you make her just for me?" The reason why Afton told her not to go play with Baby is because Elizabeth was used to playing with Mangle. William knew that if his daughter got too close to Baby, she would play with her the exact same way she played with Mangle. And that's what happened. Elizabeth got too close to her and got scooped by Baby. That means that if Baby was her own stage, Elizabeth would have to climb this stage to get close enough to be scooped. Another point I want to bring up here. It is not uncommon for single parents to have to bring their kids to work. If Elizabeth was there at Circus Babies, then Crying Child and Michael were there as well. Due to the fact that William knew that he would be busy with the other animatronics, he gave Mike the task of watching his other two siblings. I believe that the reason why Elizabeth climbed onto the stage to get to Baby after William told her not to is because Mike told her it was okay, or he didn't stop her. All of William's kids had been around animatronics before and never saw them as a threat. So, Elizabeth is scooped by Baby and then stuck there. Then all of the kids come rushing into the room and they can't hear her screams over their own excitement. I know what happens in these games, but when you actually hear yourself say what happens, it actually sounds so horrible. Anyway, back to the theory, right? She got scooped and her brothers watched it happen, and no one heard her screaming. Now, later on, William is going to notice that one of his kids has gone missing. He will eventually find her inside a Baby. And what better way to get her out than how she got in there in the first place? Scoop her out. Thus, the invention of the scooper was created to extract anything inside of the animatronics. I also believe that this event would also lead to William making Henry build the security puppet to keep kids away from where they shouldn't be. Henry agrees with the idea due to the fact that he too has a child and it is a single father. Now William goes back to the drawing board, redoing the designs of all of the Funtime animatronics, only this time he keeps drawing where his daughter ended up in the blueprints. Now we know he fixes the design flaw with Baby because Glamrock Freddy has a stomach hatch for birthday cakes. Also, whether you believe Gregory is a robot or not, he is safe inside of Freddy and can use him to get around the Pizzaplex. Having some more time to think about my theory, I still think Elizabeth is buried in the unmarked grave. But William made Mike do it because he was tasked of watching his two siblings. Then he probably becomes verbally abusive to Mike due to his drinking problem we see later on in Midnight Motorist. We will get to that game in a minute, but for right now, William and Mike are involved in what's going on. William is blaming Mike for what happened to his sister. This could be the explanations for Mike's rebellious behavior we see in FNaF 4. Now William is still not able to look after his kids due to the fact that he is working on putting his daughter back together. This is where we are going to talk about the crying child in FNaF 4. The main reason that I believe that the crying child saw his sister get scooped is because of the nightmare animatronics. We see security cameras that are in the FNaF 4 house, but there are no animatronics on the screens. This is why I believe that the nightmare animatronics are not real and just a figment of the crying child's imagination. Seeing his sister being scooped by Baby was causing the hallucinations. This can also explain why the nightmare animatronics have weird mouth stomachs. In FNaF 4, William feels comfortable leaving the kids at Fredbear's family diner with his business partner Henry. That is my best explanation for the purple shadow person helping an employee into the suits. Mostly because Scott said what is in the shadows is easily misunderstood in the mind of a child. We also know that in this game, William is in the sister location bunker talking to the crying child, while Mike is running around with his friends. The obvious person it would be Henry, helping an employee into one of the spring-lock suits to prevent a spring-lock accident from happening. The events of FNaF 4 take place, and the crying child ends up injured by another animatronic. William promises to put his son back together because he has already somewhat done it with Elizabeth. I only say somewhat because if Baby is Elizabeth at this point, she's not herself. In sister location, we hear Baby going back and forth between helping the player and having murderous intent. After the events of FNaF 4, William moves the crying child and Mike away from the FNaF 4 house and to a house that we see in Midnight Motorist. William is trying to keep his kids away from all animatronics at this point. Now, William has to make long trips to help Henry with the business on top of developing the technology to extract Remnant, so this way he can perfect putting Elizabeth back together. So, William leaves the crying child and Mike in the house and gives Mike the task of continuing to scare his brother to keep him inside of the house. I do want to point out that I do think that Mike is using the stitched up costume we see in FNaF Help Wanted. The toes on the ground match the costume, and you can't use a spring lock suit outside in the rain. Dealing with everything that has happened, William goes to a bar juniors. He is driving home at high speeds one night. We see this at the beginning of Midnight Motorist. Now, I believe that he ends up accidentally killing Charlie by sideswiping her with his car. Again, it's the best thing I could come up with given the evidence that I believe that these two minigames take place at different times. In the Crying Child minigame, the killer gets out of the car and it is not raining. We know that Scott puts a lot of details into his minigames, so the fact that it is not raining here is important. And in this minigame, the rain matches the exact same rain pattern as Midnight Motorist. Also in this minigame, there are no footprints on the ground, and we know that in the Crying Child minigame, the killer actually got out of the car. This is where the story gets complicated and where things don't really fit together. At the end of FNaF 4, William promises to put his son back together, and this is why I don't think William would kill his son outside of Freddy's location just to leave him there for anyone to find. I do think Mike killed his brother, probably due to the fact that the crying child is broken to the point where Mike knows he can't keep scaring him forever, or Mike finally just snapped. There is no clear date of when the Crying Child minigame took place, So it could be when Mike is older and allowed to drive. Or he takes the car and chases his brother down to put an end to his suffering after the events of Midnight Motorist. Okay, I'm going to stop the video here. The next part I will explain how I think William and Mike are both killers in their own way. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you haven't. Please let me know what you think down in the comments. Until next time, it has been bittersweet.